All right. So thanks again for joining us. We are going to be talking to you all about our Redbud Phenology project, which was inspired by Dr. Jorge Santiago Blay, who's joining us today. And just a run through of our agenda for today. What we are going to be talking about is the research that really inspired this campaign and what we're hoping to learn from the observations that are collected. We're also going to share with you some of the things that we learned from the last couple years. We officially launched the campaign last year, although we did collect some pilot data in the previous year. So we now are in our third year of data collection, which is very exciting. Then we'll also give a run through of the USA National Phenology Network, which is the organization behind this campaign, and our Nature's Notebook platform. And then we'll run through how we can get started with doing observations of redbuds as part of this campaign. We'll walk you through the basics of how to do observations to participate in the project. And then we'll share a whole bunch of different resources that we have available for you. And we will also make sure we have time for some Q&A at the end. So feel free in the chat, you might have already started doing this, but let us know where you're calling in from. I know we have people from all across the country, so we're really excited to learn where you're all joining us from. So it looks like we've got people from Minnesota, Virginia, Missouri, Michigan, Las Vegas, Virginia, Kentucky, Nevada, so all across the country. It's very exciting. Thank you all for joining us.
Wow, that's incredible.
All right, so I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Santiago Blay, who's going to give us a little bit of background on the campaign.
Okay, good morning or good afternoon to all of you. I'm Dr. Jorge Santiago Blay, and I began working with redbuds in the winter of 2018 to 2019. I became interested in this native, relatively small size tree in connection to the insects that may be associated with the tree. So the cups that you see on the right panel, the plastic cups, blue, yellow, and white, are the cups that I use to collect insects. And in the particular place where we have been studying them, relatively small area of about 1/8 of a football field, we have found so far close to 70 different species of bees. Also connected with the insects associated with redbuds, I don't know if my pointer can be seen, but if not, Erwin or Samantha, if you could mouse the pointer over some of the little black circles in the seed pods on the left panel, maybe to your right. Oh, that's possibly one. So we are also particularly interested in some of the insects that attack the seeds inside of the seed pods. And soon after I began working in this particular project, I became interested, with the help of undergraduates, on the phenology, namely the season to season and months to months, etc., and through time, changes on, for example, when do they flower, when do the seed pods begin to form, when do they drop the leaves, etc. Next slide, please. Okay, I don't know if you can imagine. I try to live a very responsible life, etc. So in year 2020, when I was already collecting some data on the flowering of redbuds, as well as data on the insects, I observed that there were no seed pods. And I said, oh my God, could it be that my little plastic cups have sucked all of the insects out of the state of Pennsylvania. So I was very concerned about that. Maybe I have been a bad person. So my nervousness stopped immediately once I got out of the park where I made this observation and observed that almost no redbuds had seed pods. So I said, it's not me. Something must have happened. And so I began contacting other colleagues and including colleagues at the National US National Phenology Network, and we generated this map. And the almost certain answer to the question is that there was a late spring cold snap in the area of the map indicated by the pink colors, where it says 2 weeks later all the way to 7 weeks, more or less coincide with the presence of red dots and yellow dots, which means almost no fruits or absolutely no fruits on 2020. So that means that part of the phenology of the plant has something to do with the weather, with sudden changes in the weather, besides the normal ups and downs. Next slide, please. So we were very excited because we had so many observations from so many other people, besides me. I'm just, one guy. So as I said, part of this project was inspired by undergraduates from Penn State, York. And we were studying redbuds, but not the modern redbuds, but the evidence of the redbuds left in museum collections. We have data as far back as about 1820 or so. And we were tallying the data. When did they flower according to the data on the herbaria? And we ran a few little tests, nothing worthy of publication right now. And when we generated the graphs of time on the x-axis from the past to the present, and then when the day where in this particular herbarium sheet the redbud is shown to have flowered, we notice a distinct and, in my opinion, significant decrease on when did they flower. And I said to myself, whoa, could this be that the redbuds are flowering a little bit earlier as the globe gets a little bit warmer on the average? Just like when grandma used to bake a cake, I would eagerly ask her, okay, grandma, crank the temperature so that the cake is ready and I can eat. Next slide, please. So basically the same phenomenon. And here are some examples of our esteemed citizen scientists. Next slide, please. And this is the beginning of the flowers of redbuds, and I think I have to pass the baton to Erwin and Samantha. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that overview. So yeah, we just want to give a little bit more background on redbuds and why they're such a neat species for us to track in terms of their phenology. So redbuds are really an icon of spring. They're often among the earliest plants to flower in the springtime. So they're very showy and noticeable. So a lot of people really love them for that. Eastern redbuds are typically located in the states you see here, although they are cultivated in other places. And so this is the natural range of the redbuds, but you will find them in other locations. I know we had a lot of people last year in Minnesota who have found redbuds where they live. They might have been planted or there might have been escaped cultivars. So there are lots of places outside of this map where you might be finding Eastern redbuds. But we do have a very exciting addition this year, which is we are adding the Western redbud to this campaign. And so it will be available in our system in Nature's Notebook later this month. So if you are located in a state where Western redbuds occur, which is typically Southwest states, although those are also plants that are cultivated outside of the range. But if you have a Western redbud, we would love to have you join us this year. And if you were keeping your data on paper data sheets in previous years because you wanted to add Western redbud, but it wasn't ready yet, then we can help you get those data entered as well. So just feel free to reach out about that. So as I mentioned, redbuds are early bloomers, so that does make them a little bit easier to find if you're not sure if you have a redbud tree right now during the winter. You will start to see those flowers appear before a lot of other trees will leaf out in deciduous forest. So in this picture here, you can see that a lot of these larger trees are not even leafed out yet, but we have this beautiful redbud, which is a smaller tree that's already in bloom. So it does make it a little bit easier to find. And don't worry if you happen to not find a redbud until it is in bloom here, you can still start observing even if you don't capture that start of the flowering. We'd love to have any observations that you can contribute. And another interesting thing about redbuds is they're among the species where they have their flowers before their leaves. So like you could see in that previous image, it's full of flowers, even though it doesn't really have any leaves. So you might start to see even the flowers open up before you see the tiny leaves that are here on the branches. So another way to kind of find the redbuds near you. So I wanted to share some of the results from our previous years of this campaign. So this map shows locations where we had observers in Nature's Notebook that observed Eastern redbud in the last 2 years. And so each of those dots represents an observer who submitted data on that species. And the darker the dots are the people that submitted more observations. So you can see in some of these locations, we have people who are really active in the last couple of years, submitting a lot of data on their trees. And you can see that it is mostly in the eastern part of the country. We did have a smattering of people from the western states, so it'll be good to just check in with everyone to make sure, are those really eastern redbuds? If it was a western redbud, then we can get those switched over to the right species. But we're really glad to see of the many observers who have contributed already to this campaign. We really appreciate all of your data, and we're hoping to add even more people this year. And then diving into look at the data a little bit more, this is what we call an activity curve. This is showing over the course of the year from January on the left to December on the right. When have people reported a yes to open flowers for Eastern redbuds? And so what you see on the y-axis here is the proportion of the yes records versus the no records. So it really shows the magnitude of the number of reports that were coming in that show a yes versus a no. And you can see for 2021, which was kind of our pilot year, it was pretty concentrated where we had, more of a defined peak that was around mid-April. This might have been because if we had fewer observations, maybe they were more focused in a certain part of the country. And so if you look at this last year, 2022, it's a little bit more variable where we see some open flowers even in January, and then we see a little bit more spread out. But I would invite Dr. Santiago Blay to share any input too on what your thoughts are on the data so far. Keeping in mind that this is the whole country that we're showing on this one graph, so there's a lot of variation.
I will be glad to. So, Erin, I agree with your interpretation, and that's actually one of the reasons we are interested in having more citizen scientists from all over the USA and Canada and Mexico, where both species have been reported for, so that we can separate the effects of geography from the effects of time. And when I say geography, I mean east to west and elevationally. So what we expect is that redbud will flower earlier in the warmer areas, like in the south, and then as the year moves on, the last ones to flower will be probably those in Minnesota and at higher elevations. We'll see.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And then one more graph to share. This is looking at the fruit data, where you saw ripe fruits. And so with that, there's a little bit more variation. We'll be talking about how with red buds, often the fruits will hang out on the trees for a long time. So we do see this activity in the springtime, tapering off in the late spring and summer, and then ramping up again with a higher proportion of people saying yes to ripe fruits, beginning in about August in both of the years. So any other thoughts on that to share about ripe fruits? Is this something you would expect?
Yes, very much so. One more comment, possibly this weekend, if not the next, yet another undergraduate and I are going to perform experiments on, trying to answer the question, do redbud seeds get to be wind dispersed or not? Because that has been mentioned in the literature. I don't think so, but the only way to answer these questions is by having lots of observations, and thanks to all of you.
Excellent. Yeah, that'll be really interesting to see. All right, so really the kinds of questions that we're asking, which Dr. Santiago Blay has already communicated, we have three kind of main questions that are informing this campaign. So we're wondering about the timing of both flowering and fruiting, but really does the timing of the flowering vary by location, like east to west, or even among the different latitudes, or even elevation? And then we're also wondering about that, whether there's that cycle to when there are years that have more abundant fruits. Is there, a certain, like with oaks, where there's a masting year, where there's just a lot of fruits on the trees? That's still pretty unknown. And then we're also wondering about the impact of climate change. So is the timing of redbud flowering and fruiting getting earlier? So all of your observations are going to help inform these questions. So now we're going to move to talking about how you can contribute to this campaign by participating in our Nature's Notebook program. So I'm going to pass it over to Samantha Brewer, who's our volunteer engagement coordinator, who's going to walk us through how to participate.
Hello, everybody. Thank you again so much for joining us here today. We're excited to have you. So some of you may be familiar with Nature's Notebook, and some of you may be observing with Nature's Notebook already. And for some of you, this might be a new program to you. So welcome back to everyone who's been collecting data with us, and welcome to those who might be new to the program. I'm going to talk a little bit about Nature's Notebook today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the National Phenology Network as well, and I'm going to talk about how you can get started with observing the phenology of redbud species. All right. So the USA National Phenology Network, we've been kind of working on data for phenology for about 15 years now, actually. What phenology is, for those of you who might be new to the term, because it is kind of a new term that's been going around, it's the study of the seasonal changes of plants and animals. So as the seasons change from winter, spring, summer, and autumn, the plants and animals get cues from the environment around them to go through stages in their life cycle as well. And so with phenology, we can study those cycles, and we can see how the environment affects the phenology or affects the life stages of these living things. And through time, we can see how the phenology of these organisms may change. So as the U.S. National Phenology Network, we collect, store, and share this phenology data and information to any researcher who may be interested in studying those changes. So what are we all about, though? The reason why we do this is to help researchers and land managers and scientists and communities be able to use that information to learn more about the environment around us. So this information gets used to inform decisions, perhaps land manager decisions, or maybe ecological restoration decisions, advancing scientific knowledge, communicating and connecting all the data that's collected through the USA National Phenology Network, or most of the data that's collected through USA National Phenology Network, is through volunteers such as you. So it's people who are on the ground looking and observing these plants and animals and making those connections with nature. And then we also are really about creating an equitable and inclusive network, right? So we have people who are collecting data from all across the United States. And when you have all these diverse different people collecting data, you're getting, different information or different ways of seeing what's important or how we look at phenology and how we can connect with people around us and the natural world around us as well. And so why, though, would we want to study this? Well, the world is changing constantly, and climate change is on many of our minds. But there's many different reasons why different people may want to study phenology, right? So some people might be looking at pollinators or phenological matches and mismatches. So when plants bloom, they provide nectar for many different animal species. But if plants bloom later in the year when animals aren't expecting them to be blooming, this can cause mismatches and there could be a change in food availability for animal species. Looking at phenology and looking at climate can help us with understanding better like how to manage maybe places that might be susceptible to wildfires or even invasive species. So that grass is a buffalo grass species. It's got kind of this sweet spot of greenness when it's most effectively able to be managed. So when we look at the phenology of like when it's in that ideal space that herbicides work best, we can help managers be more effective in their techniques for managing the species. Some people may use phenology for times to harvest, or we can look at when drought might be affecting different plants and animals, and also pollen and allergies. So if any of you suffer from seasonal allergies, which personally I didn't until I moved to Arizona, and then I am affected by those seasonal allergies, but that is affected by when plants are releasing pollen, and phenology can teach us a lot about that. And also phenology can teach us about insects that may be causing damage to different trees. So there's a lot of applications that can be used for this. And phenology can be just a wonderful indicator. And so it's just such a nice way when you can look at these patterns because these seasonal patterns are predictable, right? Usually we know to expect many trees to lose their leaves in the fall, and we expect many species of flowers to bloom in the spring. And so when we're looking at these different seasonal changes and what we expect versus what's happening, we can see how these living things are being affected by impacts such as climate change. And what's really great about phenology too is there are a lot of cases where we have really interesting long-term records of people who have been collecting phenology data. So for example, this is Nina Leopold Bradley. She's the daughter of one of the daughters of Aldo Leopold, and she and her family have been tracking sandhill cranes for over 61 years at this one location. And what they noticed that was on average that the sandhill cranes and geese have been arriving. I believe it was earlier. Yes, it was. They've been arriving earlier on average of 2 to 3 weeks over those 61 years than usual. They don't necessarily have a mechanism or understand the why they're arriving at that time. But when we look at data over a long-term period of time, we can start to notice those patterns. And that's one of the reasons why Nature's Notebook can be so useful is because when you're tracking the same plants or animals, so if you're tracking your same redbud tree year to year to year, you can start noticing patterns in those changes over time. So how do you keep track of plant and animal life cycles, right? So put a comment in the chat if you already look at phenology. Oh, yeah, and we've got a poll for that. Thank you, Erin. So here you can talk about how you observe phenology, right? So even if you don't use Nature's Notebook, I'm sure that you notice that the world around you changes from day to day to day. So what are some ways that you already observe phenology? I see a lot of you already use Nature's Notebook, so thank you. Taking pictures of plants and animals, I see, yeah, especially when like the flowers are just starting to bloom. It can just be really, really beautiful. Or when the leaves are turning colors in the fall, we love to take pictures of it. And then when you like scroll through your phone, you can like kind of almost see an animation of those changes. Yeah, observing phenology, but don't necessarily writing it down, right? So a lot of us might notice those things like, wait a minute, I remember that the plants are usually flowering around this time of year. But what's cool about Nature's Notebook or being able to actually write down those changes is then you can actually go back and see that record of like, yeah, that's right. I started to notice it was blooming on the 15th last year, and now it's blooming on the 18th. So that's great. Oh, writing sightings on your calendar. That's great. Oh, I love it. And keeping a nature journal. I love nature journals. Excellent. Thank you, guys. So yeah, there's lots of different ways that we can track these seasonal changes. And so with Nature's Notebook, so our organization is the USA National Phenology Network. Nature's Notebook is the citizen science program that we use, where volunteer observers collect data on the phenology that they notice. It's all throughout the United States, in some cases, Canada and Mexico as well. But we have, oh, my thing's over the screen. But I think there's over, oh, what's the number of active observers, Erin? I just can't see over the closed caption.
Over 25,000 we've had.
Thank
since the
you.
program started.
We have over 25,000 active observers. So those are people who are using Nature's Notebook to document these changes at over 18,500 sites, and over 31 million records of phenology have been collected using this program, which is just an incredible amount. And it's just, I love seeing this map because it's so great to see all these different people from different walks of life across the country participating in this program so that we can learn more about the world around us. And so through Nature's Notebook, so there are many different species of plants and animals that you can observe with Nature's Notebook. We also have specific campaigns, and these campaigns are often researchers are asking specific questions, such as with the Redbud campaign, that we're looking for answers to. So for example, nectar connectors, we're looking for nectar availability for pollinators across the United States. Quercus Quest is one where we're looking at oak tree phenology. Lilacs and dogwoods have been kind of used as an index for when spring has arrived for a long time. And so when you look at that map of the United States, those are some different campaigns that we have and kind of where those campaigns are focused. But when any contribution you have can be used by scientists, campaigns though are generally for answering specific questions that we're aware of right now. All right, sorry, then, thank you. And what's also great about Nature's Notebook is we have a visualization tool. And this visualization tool is where you can actually make a graph of your data, like what Erin showed you earlier. You can look at scatter plots. You can look at calendars. So that down in the corner there, that's a calendar showing different plants and when they have leaf or shoot or leaf growth. So the colored is when there's like, yes, leaf or shoot growth was reported. Gray is when no is reported. And so that's a really important aspect of Nature's Notebook because you're following the same plant through time. You're recording, yes, I see flowers. Yes, I see flowers, or no, I don't see flowers. And so then you're actually recording the absence of some of these phenological stages as well, which is important because then you know if you're saying, oh, I didn't see flowers on my redbud, no flowers on my redbud, and then this week I do see flowers on my redbud, you're actually able to capture when they started to flower. So that's why it's important to follow the same plants. But you can look at different visualizations, and you can even look at visualizations of larger phenology programs or what's going on with your flowers and your plants across the country. Now I'm ready to move on. And there's lots of different ways that your data are used. So all the data that you collect through Nature's Notebook is freely available to any researcher who has a phenology related question. So technically any of you could go to our website right now and download every single piece of data that volunteers have collected through Nature's Notebook. I don't recommend it. It takes a lot of hours and it takes a long time to download all that data, but we do have filters. So scientists can say like, oh, I want to look at like, you know, what were the redbuds doing this year or versus over time. They're able to download that data and it's free to use to anybody who's interested. So steps for getting started. So some of you may be familiar with Nature's Notebook and already have a Nature's Notebook account. Some of you might be new to this. If you are new to this, I'll kind of walk you through the steps of how to create a site and add redbuds. Some of you may have a new site that you want to use to add redbuds to, so I'll show you how to do that as well. But for getting started with Nature's Notebook, the first thing you're going to want to do is create a Nature's Notebook account. I will show you how to do that. Then you're going to add a personal site. And what a personal site is just the place where your Redbud tree is. So your site could be in your front yard. It could be a Redbud tree that might be outside of your office space so that you can collect data on your way to work. Or it could be some sort of public park that you frequent often that you're able to visit and collect data on the plants there. Once you've added the site, so you have your location, this is where I'm going to be observing my Redbud, then you can add a Redbud to your site. Right now we have Eastern Redbud, but soon we're also going to have Western Redbuds. And then you'll be able to record the data on your Redbud. We'll also invite you to sign up for campaign emails. So I mentioned we have a whole bunch of campaigns, but you can also specifically sign up for the Redbud campaign emails, where you'll get periodic updates on the data that we're seeing that people have been collecting on the Redbuds, or any new Redbud news, or if there's any sort of webinars such as these. All right. So for creating a Nature's Notebook account, the first thing you will want to do is to download the Nature's Notebook app. You can also go to naturesnotebook.com and sign up, or naturesnotebook.org, excuse me, to become an observer. It does ask when you do it on the website to go through a whole bunch of steps to get your site set up. It's a little bit quicker through the app. So generally I recommend the app, and I'll be walking you through the steps for how to create a Nature's Notebook account using the Nature's Notebook app. So if you are interested in collecting data, and if you happen to have your phone available right now, in the Apple or Google Play Store, if you look for Nature's Notebook, you'll see the icon with our little sprig goldfinch right there. And when you download it, you'll be prompted to create an account. So you'll have a username. It doesn't have to be your actual name. It includes your email address, and it'll prompt you to make a password. Once you've downloaded the app, and some of you may be doing that now, and if I'm going a little fast, don't worry, because you'll be able to go back because this is going to be recorded. But once you download the app, you'll be able to add a personal site. So down in the lower left-hand corner, when you open the app, you'll see it says create a site. There we go. Thank you. You'll be able to create a site, and you'll be able to pick on the map where your site is. And this is important because it gets tied to like latitudinal and longitudinal data. It gets tagged to climate data so that scientists can make those connections with what's going on with the climate and the phenology of the plants and animals that you're observing. So you'll create a site. And when you do create a site, make sure that where you're observing your Redbud, if you're like, oh, I don't know this Redbud that's in the middle of the woods, it's like 50 miles down this dirt road, that's often inaccessible. That's not always the best place, because then it's hard to get to it often. So you'll want to pick a site that's convenient, that's representative of your area, right? So if you're urban versus like a suburban area, or maybe even there is a hiking trail that you go to every weekend. Make sure that the habitat is fairly uniform and an appropriate size that you're actually able to observe. So some of you might have a site where you're going to be looking at multiple different species, but some of you might just have a small site with just your one Redbud tree that you're going to be observing. So it's all going to be different just based on your location and what's convenient and available to you. And then you're going to add a Redbud to your site. So at the very top of the app, you'll see there's a plants and animals tab. You tap on that tab, and then at the bottom, you can click on add plants and animals. And so then when you add plants and animals, you can select a new plant or animal, and then you'll want to look, you can scroll through or type in Eastern Redbud. And then you can give it a nickname. So the default nickname is like Eastern Redbud 1, but maybe you want to have like the Western Red, the Redbud by the house versus the Redbud by the road, right? So you could say Road Redbud or House Redbud or whatever helps you remember your individual plants. Because remember, what's important is that you're monitoring that you're being consistent with the same plant over time, because plants can have variation even with ones that are right next to each other. So when you're looking at the same plant through time, that's the easiest way that you can start to see those changes in those patterns. But yes, you can add one Redbud. You can have multiple red buds. You can have, if, you know, maybe some of you have a lot of gumption and you want to have like 10 red buds, and I applaud you for that. But if you're fairly new to this, you might want to start with one or two because you can always add more later. All right. If you're already a Nature's Notebook observer, you can add Redbud to your existing site. So let's say that you've been maybe watching, maybe you've been observing milkweeds at your site, and you're like, hey, I've got a Redbud tree. I want to participate in the Redbud program because I've got a Redbud in my yard. You can go to your sites. So for your personal sites here, like you might have multiple personal sites. You can select which of those sites or which of those locations that you're monitoring. And then you can go to plants and animals, and then you can add Redbud. So you can either make a brand new site if you're new to this, or even if you've already been observing with Nature's Notebook, you're like, yeah, I've been observing in my yard, but down at work, that's where my Redbud is. You can add a site there at your work. So you can either add Redbuds to your current sites, or you can make a new site. And I do see questions popping up, and we'll definitely answer all those at the end today. And then if you want, you can provide more details about your site, right? And this can help scientists like learn more about what's going on. So they can say like, how close is your Redbud to a road? Is it watered with irrigation, perhaps? Like if it's a Redbud that's at a botanical garden, that maybe they water it. So there's different questions that you can answer with details about your site. If you create a Nature's Notebook account on our website, it'll ask for these details kind of right away. But it's okay to just add a few of them to start with so that you can add your Redbud plant. But once you have a site if you've used the app, you can go online if you want to add details about our site by logging onto the website, going to your observation deck, and then at the bottom there that Erin highlighted, you can say edit site or add or edit plants or add or edit animals, and you can make any changes that you need to your location or the animals that you're observing and plants. And then you can record the data. So when you're collecting data, now you're like, yes, I have a Redbud in my yard. I've got it in here. I'm ready to collect phenology observations. The way you collect the phenology observations is basic yes or no questions. So when you go out and you look at your tree, do you see breaking leaf buds? Do you see leaves? Do you see the leaf size increasing, or flowers, or open flowers, or fruits? You can answer yes or no. Do I see leaves? Do I see flowers? Do I see fruits? And then you just tap on that section on the app on whether or not you see those. Now, for some of you who are new, you might be like, I'm not super comfortable knowing if this is a breaking leaf bud or not. And this is where I always tell people to embrace the question mark. It's okay if you don't know. With the question mark, you're not doing anything that like negatively affects the data. And what it does is it shows us that, yes, someone was there, someone was observing. They just weren't sure if they saw this or not, right? And what's really great as well is they're like, I'm not sure if that was a breaking leaf bud. You can always go back, because if you go back a couple days later and you're like, that was definitely a breaking leaf bud, you can go back and then you can answer yes or no if you'd like. But yeah, so you'll just answer yes or no or the question mark for any of those phenophases. And then, but that also begs the question of like, well, how do you even define a breaking leaf bud, right? So we have very specific protocols for all the plants and animals available to observe with Nature's Notebook. So for example, with flowers, right? So are these flowers? Are these open flowers or fruits or ripe fruits, which we've mentioned? You can actually, there's a little eye icon on your data sheet that you can click if you're not sure. You can also visit our website with the species details, but we have definitions for each of those. So with flowers or flower buds, if you see any fresh or unopened flowers or flower buds on the plant. With open flowers in general, it's if the flowers are open and you can see the reproductive parts, those little pistils and stamens. If you can see those inner reproductive parts of the plant, that's when there's open flowers. A fruit, so the botanical term for a fruit is basically anything that encloses a seed, right? So you might see some fruits starting to form at the base of the flowers. Those can count as fruits. And then, but how do you know if your fruit is ripe? With red buds or eastern red buds, it's when it has turned dark brown. So we do have definitions for the phenophases that you can always go back to if you're unsure. And just so you know, you can have multiple phenophases occurring at the same time, right? So in the spring, you might see flowers, right? When those first flower buds are there, you say, yes, I saw flowers or flower buds. And then when the flowers open, you would say, yes, I saw flowers and I saw open flowers, because not all the flowers might be open, right? Maybe one or two are open, but you're saying, yes, I did observe flowers. Yes, I did observe flower buds. And then as the season progresses, after those flowers are pollinated, you'll start to see some fruits, right? So yes, I saw fruits, but there can be fruits at the same time as flowers and open flowers. And same with fruits, you'll see fruits that are not quite ripe, and then you'll see them transition to ripe fruits, and then recent fruit and seed drop, meaning like since the last time I was here, some of the fruits have fallen from the tree. And so monitoring frequency. So we do encourage people to monitor your plants as often as you're able. If you're able to at least once a week, that is awesome, because the more often you go to that plant, the more accurately you're able to capture when those flowers first appeared, when those flowers started opening, when the fruits started appearing and ripening. Because when you go, like, let's say you went out to check out your red buds right now, probably most of you are going to say, no, I didn't see any flowers. Maybe some of you have some ripe fruits, right? But most of you say, no, I didn't see any flowers. No, I didn't see any ripe fruits. And so if you keep going every week, nope, no flowers, no flowers, no flowers, no flowers. Then at the beginning of April, perhaps, now I know where those flowers are. Now I see flowers. So you're able to say through your data, I was present, someone was present and observing, we didn't see them. Now we know that this is accurate for when those flowers started appearing. If you only go once a month, let's say you go March 1st, and then you go and you say, no, I didn't see flowers. And then you go April 1st, yes, I did see flowers. That's a whole month when those flowers could have started appearing. So the more often you go, the more accurate your data is going to be. And this is just another picture of that calendar I mentioned before. I think these are just really, really neat, because the gray is when people observed no's, and the colors are when people observed yeses. So for like the fruits and seed cones, you can say people did not observe fruits or seed cones, but then they started observing them. They start seeing them in June. And then at the bottom with the ripe fruits, you can see there's some more spacing, right? Those spaces are when there was no one there at all. No one was making those observations. So we can see how often people were making observations, and then you can get a look at how accurate it is. Of like in August, sometime in the beginning of August is when those people started reporting ripe fruits. So this is just a nice visual to show the importance of the no data, because sometimes in the winter it can be a little uneventful when you're out there and you're like, there's nothing on my trees, but it's still really important data, because maybe that'll be an early spring and you might start seeing those buds appearing earlier than you would expect. Right? So also with recording data, there's also intensity data. If you're new to Nature's Notebook, it's really okay to say unsure. So you're going to embrace the question mark when you're not sure, and you're going to embrace the unsures. I love putting unsures on some of my plants, because there are some things that I'm just really not sure about, like with canopy cover. But if you are feeling confident in intensity questions, you can kind of estimate how many flowers might be present. And whenever we do these estimations for a number of flowers, it's in a range. So we don't expect you to go to your redbud tree and take all day counting the flowers. That would be, well, I mean, maybe some of you are into that. I'm not going to judge, but that is not my deal. So, but what's nice is you can get this range of how many flowers are on the tree, which is actually going to be really helpful for scientists too, because then they can have this kind of idea of the range of flowers that are present. So maybe you see less than 3 flowers, or 3 to 10, or 11 to 100, 101 to 1,000, 1,000 to 10,000, or even more than 10,000 flowers. So you can do an estimation of your tree of how many flowers that you're seeing, so that you don't have to be like, I don't know, there could be 75, there could be 80. You just have to fill out that, yeah, there was between 11 and 100 flowers. And this intensity question is really helpful, because it shows us then like when the trees started opening their flowers, and then when we see those peak flowering for these species. And it's the same with fruits. And if you record your redbud tree at least once a week in 6 separate weeks, you'll earn your Redbud Phenology badge. So when you have a Nature's Notebook account, on your observation deck, you'll earn badges for making observations. And so you'll earn this beautiful Redbud Phenology Project badge when you've observed your redbuds at least once a week in 6 separate weeks in 2023. We also have those campaign emails that I mentioned earlier that you can sign up for. And do we have a link for that ready, Erin? Yeah, Erin's got a link. She'll put a link in the chat so that you can sign up for the Redbud Phenology Project messages. So we'll send out every few weeks. We send out a message of like, here's what's going on with the flowers, here's what you've been observing, and here are some of the things that we've learned from your observations. All right, so now I've talked a little bit about how to observe with Nature's Notebook. So now we're going to have an opportunity to test your skills. So haha, there was an exam, but don't worry, you won't be judged and I don't know what you answered. But it's an opportunity to practice your observation skills with redbuds. And I think this is, oh, there it is. Great. Thank you, Erin. So here's our slide for this poll. So for this picture that you see up on your screen right now, do you see flowers or flower buds? And once again, as you're answering this, the definition is one or more fresh or open or unopened flowers are visible on the plants. So this can include flower buds, it can include inflorescence that are swelling or expanding, but just don't include the ones that are tightly closed or not actively growing, such as dormant ones. And also, for flowers, once the flowers have kind of wilted and dried, you don't want to count those either. So you want those fresh flower buds and open flowers. Yes. Oh my gosh. So far, I'm seeing a lot of yeses. You guys are seeing flowers on that redbud tree. So even though these flowers are still in their buds, you would still say yes for flowers. Oh, we're still getting real. Yes. Excellent job. Oh, there's a whole train. All right, we'll move on to the next one. Do I have to end the poll? I might have to end the poll. Excellent. All right, we'll move on. There we go. Now, how do I move to the next slide now? Oops. Yeah, I'm ready for the next slide. All right, so for this plant, or for this one, we've got some redbud fruits. So I'll go, here we go. Oh, thank you. Oh, this one's flower still. Hold on. Back.
Yeah, so this is they're all 4 questions are on both of the polls, so you can have a chance to answer all of them. So there's a couple questions about flowers and a couple questions about fruits. But just answer what you can. You can always use that question mark.
Yes, thank you, Erin. But in this one, it's fruits, right? So are you seeing fruits or are you seeing ripe fruits on your on this redbud that's available here now? Right, so flowers and flower buds on this one, I don't see any flowers or flower buds on this particular plant. Oh, there it is. I have to scroll down. That's why. All right, open flowers. Nope, I don't see open flowers on this slide as well. But just like you guys, I do see fruits. And I definitely see ripe fruits, right? Because we define the ripe fruits as it's turning brown. And these don't look like empty pods. They look like you can see the thickness of where there's still the seeds inside. So excellent. That's all there is to it. So when you go out and you look at your tree, yes, do I see flowers? Do I see fruits? Do I see leaves? And if you're unsure about the definitions, those are available on our app or on our website to tell you the actual definitions of the phenophases. A few things to remember about redbuds as well. Some redbud trees may not flower until they're several years old. So don't worry if you're like, I'm gonna plant a brand new redbud and it's not flowering. Do not be afraid. You did not necessarily break your tree. It just might need time to grow, right? But that's part of the plant is you can actually, or part of the data, you can enter when your plant was planted. And so then you can monitor it and then you can see like, okay, this is when my plant was and this is how many years I've had it and now it's starting to flower. So that's actually still really cool information that you could put. So don't worry if you planted it or you see a new redbud, it's not broken. Also, don't count the winter flower buds until they swell. So if you go outside right now because you're super excited about your redbuds and you see all these little tiny buds on the tree, those are the dormant buds. Those are that's the tree was getting ready to flower in the spring. But it doesn't have those kind of environmental keys yet to actually be producing the flowers. So don't count those dormant buds. You want to see when they're actually starting to swell and turn pink. And also for the open flowers, you're going to want to see when they're open and you can see the reproductive parts of the flowers. We do have a botany primer available on the Nature's Notebook website. If you're like, what on earth do you mean the reproductive parts of a flower? When flowers make seeds, they actually have pistils and stamens inside for pollination, and that's how seeds get made. And so you want to look for those reproductive parts with open flowers. And also, red buds might hold on to empty seed pods all winter. If the pods have released their seeds, then you should stop counting yes for those particular plants. So you'll still see those empty pods just when they actually have the fruits. And also the young leaves may appear red on red buds. That's not the colored leaves that occurs in late autumn. And so that we actually have definitions for colored leaves with the different plants as well. So you don't want to count colored leaves for the ones that are appearing. We know that they're going to be a different color. You want to count yes for colored leaves in the autumn. If you're not sure, it's okay to say unsure. And you can always go back later and fix it when you're more comfortable. And if you do have a couple individual trees, you might want to consider selecting 2 or 3s. It's also super interesting when you can see the slight differences between your trees, because sometimes it's like, oh, all the red buds do at the same time. But just like people, every single tree is unique. And so it's neat to be able to observe those unique differences and also being able to see how those trees have changed through time. But once again, don't do too many unless you're comfortable doing too many. Always start small, add more later. All right. And so once again, if you're new to Nature's Notebook, we have lots of training materials and resources. We have definitions for the phenophases of the red buds. We also have that botany primer. So if you're like, how do plants actually work? And what are these different phenophases? And why do we record these specific ones? It's a really great resource. We have it as a free PDF that you are free to download and distribute to anyone who might be interested. And then we also have printouts of the phenophases for each of the plants as well. We also have an observer certification course. So once you have a Nature's Notebook account, this is a free certification course that you can take that actually goes through the training of observing with Nature's Notebook. So yes, you could just open your app and go outside. Yes, I see leaves. Yes, I see flowers. Yes, I see fruits. And you're like, oh, some of these data points might be a little complicated. But if you go through the observer certification course, we just walk you through the process of these definitions and intensities. You can take it at your own pace. And at the end, I think you get the badge, but you will show on your learning dashboard that you've completed those modules, and then it'll help you feel confident in being able to use Nature's Notebook. There's also local phenology programs. So with Nature's Notebook, there's individual observers like many of you who might be making your own observations in your yard, but there's also local phenology programs, which is generally like a larger organization or maybe a larger group of people who might have volunteers who come regularly to observe the plants and animals at their sites. We have local phenology leader certification courses if you're interested in starting a local phenology program where you might have a group of people who'd be interested in monitoring plants and animals, especially like if you've got red buds at your arboretum. We've got program planning resources available for how to get your program started. We have monthly calls with volunteer and recruitment and retention strategies. And we also have our community of practice where we have community forums and discussions where we can help each other out to be successful in observing phenology. All right, just as a recap, once again, if you would like to monitor redbuds, you'll want to create a Nature's Notebook account. You'll want to add your site where your redbud is and your redbuds. Record your observations at least once a week as you're able to. And also don't feel bad if you like missed a week. You're like, oh, I missed a week, everything's ruined. No, it is not ruined. You can get started again whenever you are able to, okay? Take advantage of those training materials and also sign up for those Redbud campaign messages. All right, if you do need help, if you have any further questions, or if your redbud starts blooming and you're like, I don't remember anything and I don't remember that link, you are free to email me at samantha@usa-npn.org. I am happy to answer any questions that you have, or even Dr. Santiago Blay, and especially he's got a wealth of redbud knowledge. If you just have any questions about redbuds at all, because they're a fascinating plant and the research he's doing is really, really incredible. So thank you all for your time. Thank you all for being here today. We'll stick around and answer any questions that you may have.
Awesome. So we do have some questions in the chat. Did you want to hop in on, there are a couple that I thought maybe you could answer, especially the one about the Western redbuds and how to tell apart the two species.
Yes, if I may share my screen.
I think you need
would that be okay? Let's see. Ooh, I can.
Yeah, there you go.
Yippee. Okay, excellent questions. Okay, so this weekend or the next, besides trying to learn whether a redbud seeds are wind dispersed or not, I think they are not, unless there is a hurricane. We are also going to be planting seeds of 4 or 5 of the species of redbuds, which I currently have in our home refrigerator. We will scarify them, which means to sand them a little bit, just a little bit, and then plant them and water them regularly. Okay, key question: how to distinguish Eastern from Western? Easiest way is leaf shape. So I'm gonna change this and I'm gonna put Cercis occidentalis or Western redbud on the western part of my screen, right? And Eastern redbud on the eastern part of my screen. Tell me, can you see a difference? I can see it right away. Leaf shape. Which one is closer to a heart, or which one is more roundish, more roundish? Any answers? Any comments on the chat, or feel free to voice them?
Eastern heart.
Yes. And occidentalis, the heart is a little flattened, right? It's roundish. Now, somewhere in the so-called Midwest, this difference kind of breaks down and is tough to distinguish them. Okay, that's one of the questions we have. Western redbud tends to be smaller in size than Eastern redbud, but I always wonder how much is that an effect of the soil or of the climate of the environment where they live. So we'll see once we have all of these in a common garden. Any questions about? Any more questions about this? And remember, you can always email me. My email address at the Museum of Natural History is BlyJ, just 5 letters, like my mother's last name, Bly, and then the letter J, at smithsonianinstitution.edu. Now, I want to tackle something else as Samantha was talking. I was busy trying to get all of these drawings done, which of course I could not, or next time. So the difference between variety and cultivar. There was a question, do you want us to report on the straight species or are cultivars okay? And Erin, please correct me. I think cultivars and varieties are okay. There is a site on the Nature notebook which I never remember exactly where observers can actually write, okay, this is rising sun, or this is something cascade. There are over 100 cultivars of Redbud. Why? It commands a lot of money economically. It's very popular. It is native to Eastern North America, but it's now becoming worldwide. For example, some of us may see a gardening show called Gardener's World. The host typically is a guy from the UK by the name of Monty Dunn. And one day he was showing a garden, and my wife tells me, my dearie, isn't that Redbud? And from far away, I say, of course it is. It's Cercis canadensis in the UK. Okay. And so I was communicating from another colleague from the UK and asking if they could send me samples. And this colleague said, we don't have Cercis canadensis in the UK. And I replied immediately, why don't you watch the most recent episode of Gardener's World? It's there. It's in Russia. It's everywhere. So cultivar is made by the hand of humans. It's a variety that's made by the hand of humans. A variety is made by the metaphorical hand of nature. Okay. Now, how much redbuds can vary tremendously? They can vary in three architecture, from the regular, and I should have put this one first, from the regular rounded shape to one that is very tall, very pyramidal, very kind of skyrocket. Another way in which they can vary is leaf color, from, of course, green to burgundy. And we are not talking about fall colors here. These are regular spring colors, from green to burgundy to a variety called rising sun, which is my favorite one, which it seems that for rising sun, it is always the fall because the leaves are yellowish. It's a beautiful tree. Flower color, it can be magenta, pink, white, you name it. But it's always in that range as far as I have seen, and I have seen many of them, etc. So the best way, if one is not familiar with redbud, is to wait until early in the spring. It's one of the first flowering trees. You will recognize it immediately by the flower, this bean-like flower. Let me just show you a few examples. Redbud flower. And just like my background, is very, very, very pinkish. Something interesting as well, flowers can come out of the wood. That not very many plants do that. Is cauliflorous, meaning that the flower can emerge from the woody part of the plant. Okay, just here is a dramatic example. Okay, so if you haven't seen redbud, before, it's going to be very, very easy. Any more questions?
There were a couple more, and I just want to emphasize, as you're saying, we don't actually list the separate cultivars in Nature's notebooks. You'll either add an Eastern or a Western redbud when you add it to your site. But like you were saying, on the Nature's Notebook website, on what's called your observation deck, which is when you're logged in on the website, and Samantha was showing how you can do the edit site or edit plant. That is where you can indicate in the metadata, which is the questions about your plant, that you do have a cultivar, and there'll be a comment field where you can say whatever you want to say about your plant, including the cultivar.
Thank you.
So that's
Thank
where
you.
you can indicate that. Yeah, we did have another question too about whether for people who have been observing redbuds for some time, if there's anything special they need to do to be part of the campaign. Really, it's just signing up for the emails if you want to get updates about the project. You don't have to sign up for the campaign. You can skip the emails if you don't want to hear from us, but we will be sending out updates on the campaign, the results, and other news. So I do recommend signing up, and I have that link in the chat. I can post it again. And then we had, let's see, just posted that again in case you're looking for it. There was another question about the seed pods. So is it okay to quit counting and reporting the mature seed pods with seeds that remain on the tree once the flower buds start to swell? And we generally, I think as long as there are seeds in the pods, if you can feel the seed pods and you feel the bumps in there, you can keep reporting the seed pods as long as they remain on the tree. They should eventually fall off, right? I don't know if you have an estimation of when that happens. I know they can remain on the tree for what, a year or more. Do you want to say anything else about that? Dr. Santiago Blay, about the length of time that the seed pods remain?
I have seen them well over the corresponding winter. For example, the seed pods that we see now, which is 2023, are those that were formed back in our area, May of 2022, and they will probably hang on for dear life, as I like to say, until there is a very strong wind or rain, etc. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
don't think more than a year. I
yeah,
don't think
okay.
so.
So yeah, I would recommend still reporting yes, as long as there's pods with seeds on the tree, even if you start to see the new flowers and leaves on the tree. And then there's also a question from the same person about the leaves, and in this person's experience, the leaves seem to expand for weeks before they're at their full size. It has a very slow expansion. Have you noticed that as well?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, so you can indicate that. You don't have to report leaves for this particular campaign. We're really interested in the flowers and the fruits, but you're welcome to report on the leaves. And if you do, you can always indicate that the leaves are still growing for weeks. There was another question about recommendations for where to buy barefoot red buds. Like, I think they mean the ones that are not in pots, but the bare root saplings. Do you have any recommendations on where to purchase?
No, I do not. I have contacted, because of my interest in getting a hold of other species of redbuds, I have contacted numerous nurseries. I don't have their emails and names handy, but they are in my past emails. If you email me directly, let me once more put my email here. I'll try to compile a list and send it to Erin or to Samantha, and then you can distribute that. There was another question about whether we are following Cercis canadensis, the different named subspecies. My answer, but again, Erin, feel free to overrule me, is that would be absolutely fine. If you know that it is Cercis canadensis, just on that part of Nature notebook where one can put whether it is such and such cultivar or such and such variety, just simply put what subspecies you think it is. For me, it would be of great interest, because once more, that's one of those question marks that I have. What are the exact circumscriptions of each of the species? I don't think we have data for the Mexican subspecies. So that would be fantastic, in my opinion.
Yeah, so just like the cultivars, we don't go to the level of subspecies, but you can put the information in the plant comments as well for that. There were a couple of recommendations on where to buy redbuds in the comments, so you can check that out if you're looking for a redbud. Another question, does Eastern redbud do nitrogen fixing? Do you know the answer to that?
Not from the top of my head. I have looked at that question and I don't remember the answer, but I'm gonna make a note and look for it right away.
And then a question about a redbud that's been damaged over a long period of time, cutting the limbs to the ground and letting it regrow. Are there any problems or should this be noted? I would probably put that in the comment field when you register your plant, because that could impact the phenology. And then if you do any pruning, you can also indicate that when you make your observation that since your last observation that the tree has been pruned. And so all that will be tied to your data. And so if researchers are looking at the data, they'll see that. And someone did say yes, that it is a nitrogen fixer.
I just Google it, and that is what this particular site says. But I will check on the scholarly literature to double check.
Yeah, so thank you for all the great questions. So we have been recording the webinar. We're going to be sending out the recording link in the follow-up email later today, so you can always review it if you need to. And then we'll also take some of the great questions and include them in the emails that we'll be sending out. So make sure to sign up for the emails that are part of this campaign if you want to keep getting updates and hear about how we are using the data that you're collecting. But I think we will probably end things now. We're a bit over time, and we really appreciate all of the great questions and engagement. We really appreciate you being interested in tracking of Redbud. And we will be in touch over email. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.